StrayAllDay.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself, especially yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together in one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book. This show, this daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and everyone, welcome to the show. And ladies and gentlemen, you all know well enough, you've been listening to the show for even a week, you know that most of the time that it's just me here. Now, you're either watching this on video, if we put this on YouTube or wherever, or you are listening to the audio, but you saw the title of the episode, so you know that this is not the normal episode here. We are having the only person besides me who's been on this show more than once is back again. We had this person who we have on today was on here, I believe it was in 2017 was the first time, spring of 2017. Then again it was either that same year, I don't remember if it was the same year or the next year. We'll find out in a moment. And now he is back because this person who I've known for a long time has been progressing in his career, progressing in his profession. And I believe there's a lot of stuff that we are going to learn from this individual and where he's been on his journey, even since the last time that you heard him here on this show, that all of us can learn from, even if you are not in his industry, even if you don't do what he does. So once we get deeper into this conversation, actually, before we even get deep, as soon as we start it, you will understand why that is. So without further ado, I want to welcome once again a gentleman that I met in college. We were college basketball teammates. He was the first person to show me how to do the crossover when I didn't know how to do the crossover and help expand my game. He was one of only two players, myself being the other, to come out of our school and become a professional basketball player still to this day, almost 20 years later. A person who I am happy to call a lifelong friend, professional colleague, and a brother still to this day, Mr. Wes Pifer, for his third appearance on the Work on Your Game show. Wes, thank you for being here and welcome to the show once again.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dre. I appreciate that intro, man. But it's always important for me. Like, if you extend the invite for me to come and share the podcast, means a lot. Obviously, you as a brother and somebody I look at as a mentor, means a lot to come and share. So I'm excited to be here, man. I actually cleared out my house. My kids aren't here, so we could really dive deep into a couple of things. So I'm super excited.
Excellent. Hopefully we could dive deep into a lot of things. So I'm glad that we're able to arrange this conversation here. So for those of you some of you may be newer to the show, maybe you haven't been listening to the show for the last maybe 2 years, so maybe they haven't heard you, Wes, on the show before. You were on the show in it was 2017, 2018. Now we're here in 2020. So if you could give people just a 2 to 3 minute background on who you are, where you're from, and all the way up, fast forwarding to where you are today, just so people know exactly who you are, and then we're going to get into more of the details, all the in between of that in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from a small town called Creedmoor, North Carolina. Born and raised there. To kind of fast forward straight to college, I played at two different Division III universities, Methodist University, Penn State University, Altoona, where I met Dre. And, Dre already talked about it. From there, I went on to play professionally, which doesn't happen a lot for people who, went to Division III institutions. Had a chance from there to kind of find my passion, which was working with and trying to help and further student athletes' lives. I started out coaching at my high school for free. The reason I started there is because at that time I was 23 years old. I was already a graduate of Penn State. I played basketball professionally. I was looked at as a success in my community, and I really just wanted people to see that you could get out of there, that you could make a positive impact on others. And that's why I started coaching there. Had no idea that, my journey would take me to where I'm in right now. I became a collegiate coach 2008 at Miami-Dade Junior College. And then to fast forward from there, I spent 2 more years Division II. I was a Division II assistant for So that was 3 years. I went on to North Carolina Central University with Lavelle Moton as an assistant, championship level program for 2 years. I was an assistant and eventually the associate head coach at Northern Arizona University, and now I'm in my second year as the head coach at Western Oregon University. That's Division II in the GNAC conference. Hopefully that was enough background to kind of get you guys like eventually in the mix of kind of who I am.
Yes, absolutely. And we're gonna fill in all the gaps between Creedmoor, North Carolina, and now in this conversation here. So for everyone who's listening, if you did not hear the first two times Wes appeared on the show, those would be episodes number 714 and also episode number 883. So all you who are game group members, you have access to all of that material. That's 714 and 883. So we're not going to rehash everything we talked about in those two. Again, I just told everybody where they can go listen to those. But Wes, the last time that you were on the show, you had told us that you had just been promoted to associate head coach at Northern Arizona University, which is a D1 basketball program in Arizona. What has happened since then, and where are you now?
Last time we talked, I was being promoted to associate head coach, and essentially at that level, it's basically from the outside looking in, telling people that you're ready to run your own program and all the stuff that comes with that. Was very fortunate for my head coach Jack Murphy believing in me to that level to do that for me and my family. And essentially, what it did was really change the trajectory of my career. That now people from the outside, like I said, in thought that I was somebody who could be a strong head coaching candidate. I came across this opportunity at Western Oregon University to interview here. Luckily, people believed in me. Curtis Campbell, Randy Lyndon believed in me and afforded me this opportunity to run my own program. We had a really, really strong first year. We went 19-8. We led the country in free throw percentage. We were top 25 in 5 of the offensive categories. We led our league in 11 different categories. Like, we had a really good year. We had 2 guys we actually had 3 guys on the all-league teams. We had 1 guy that was on the West Region team who recently just signed his first professional deal, and Dalvin Brashear. We had a really good year. So I guess the trajectory of me is now I'm a head coach. I'm running kind of my own program and kind of seeing like the years of, between playing and coaching, about 20 years of work really coming to fruition right now with me having a chance to kind of live out my vision and kind of share what I think the program should look like.
Excellent. So who are those, you said a couple people who believed in you. I didn't recognize those names. Who were those people that you name dropped there that believed in you?
Yeah, so Curtis Campbell was our intercollegiate director of athletics out here.
Okay.
20-year veteran in the game. He's probably the person, I'll remember that call for the rest of my life when he called and he said, "Hey, do you want to be our head coach here at West?" And call I dreamed of for, since I got into the game.
Yeah.
And then Randy was his number 2. Now she's number 1 because he's moved on to another opportunity. So those 2 really believed in me getting this opportunity.
Okay, so when they called you and offered you the job, like, where were you? What was it like? How did you react? Did you say yes immediately? Did you have to think about it? Like, how'd that happen?
Yeah, I can vividly remember. It was about 10:40. It was about 10:45. I was on the street right before my house in Arizona when the phone rang. I took the call on Bluetooth. When I saw the number pop up on my thing, they said something was going to come down in the next 2 days. I had no idea what happened that fast. So he called me. I didn't know what he was going to say. But anybody who knows him knows he cuts right to the chase. He said, "Wes, how you doing?" I said whatever I said. He's like, "Hey, I just want to know if you want to be our next head coach here at Western." And I just said, "Absolutely." He said, he was like, "Well, I'll give you 24 hours." I said, "I don't need it." I was like, me and my wife have been on board since, the start of this, and I don't need any time. I'm ready to get to work. So that's kind of how it went.
Okay, and this is Chad you're referring to. That's the person who called you?
Curtis.
Oh, Curtis. All right, Curtis called you. So the interview process, let's talk a little bit about that because a lot of people, when they're trying to get positions, whether they're as a coach or you trying to work for a company or something, even if you're qualified, right, you still have to go through that process, and you have to, I'm assuming you went and met them and sat down with them and talked to them, maybe on video, maybe in person, and you probably weren't the only person they were looking at, right? Like, because they had to decide amongst you and other people. So what was the interview process like when you knew you were going in for a possible head coaching job? What was that interview process like? How many people were you competing against, and what did you feel like your chances were before they called you and offered you the job?
It started off with a phone interview. I think they phone interviewed 12 candidates, and then from there they decided to bring 5 guys to actual campus and interview them on campus like a whole day. So you basically spend a whole day immersing yourself in the campus, I met with my team, my team now. I met with them, met with search committee, I met with our president, I met with our faculty athletic representation. They just grill you with questions almost for a whole day. In a lot of different settings, and you're getting questions from a lot of different people, just like any interview process. So it was me and 5 other candidates, and I think at that point, the way you can separate yourself is just be yourself. You're going to be the person that gets the job. So I really tried to go in there, number one, more prepared than any candidate. I've done tons and tons of research on the people that I was going to interview with. I did a ton of research on the president, the strategic plan of the university, and then the university itself, the logistics, what makes it work, what makes it unique in my mind, and how those things kind of merge together and how they fit together between my coaching philosophy, the culture that I wanted to have, and how they all fit together. So when you talk about, that between 5 other candidates, you might get 5 different things. So I kind of try to separate myself from there. What was the second part of your question, Dre?
I was asking you how many people you competed against for the job, and just what you thought your chances were after you finished all the interviewing.
After I finished all the interviewing, I felt great, but I didn't know what my chances were. I was up against 2 former Division I head coaches who had success. Both of those guys had been to the NCAA tournament, so their top 5. You're talking about there was only one other person that didn't have head coaching experience, and 2 of them had at the highest level and with the highest wins. Talking about going to NCAA. So all I could do was, really go in there and beat Wes Pifer. So if you're asking my chances when I knew that final group, I'd say about 20-25%. But I was myself 100%. And, you're just talking about, in any interview process that you're trying to get to, the advice that I give people is like that job started with 225 people. So then it got down to 12 to 15. And my advice is always like, you're just trying to survive and get to the next step. So if the next step is a phone interview, try your best to get to the phone interview. If your next step is an on-campus interview, do your best to try to get the on-campus interview. And after that, then you try to get the job. So if somebody's calling you in to meet with them in person, they already know you can do the job. So what you have to do at that point is you got to really sell yourself. You got to really sell yourself and sell your vision, sell your leadership. And I think that's what's going to get you the job.
So it's interesting that what you talked about there, when you showed up on the campus, that's at Western Oregon. Where in Oregon is that, for just so people know on the map?
Yeah, Monmouth, Oregon.
Monmouth, Oregon. And shout out to Monmouth, Oregon, because, Wes, you know this, but me and our other guy, Brandon Battles, we went out there this past season right before COVID, right? This was right before COVID took over.
Yeah.
We went out there to a game, and Monmouth is a beautiful town. It's very clean. And shout out to that Airbnb we stayed at. The Airbnb was perfect, very on point. So we come out there again, as long as you're still there. We definitely want to get that same Airbnb. But one of the things that you said when you talked about the interview process, and how you would talk to one person, then another, and you're just getting interviewed by all these different people in one day. My sister, Latoya Baldwin Clark, who I interviewed the first time you came on, she came on a week after you. She talked about the same thing. When she got her job she's at UCLA right now, that they just hit you with one person, next person all day. So I'm assuming, and that's at a college too, even though she's not a coach, she's a professor. I'm assuming that's just what they do. So anybody listening who wants to get into working at a university, I'm thinking you're noticing a pattern here that you should be ready to get grilled, and you got to impress. You got to impress multiple people. So what's one thing that you said there that was interesting to me was that you said when you knew you were going to interview, you did research on the school and research on the people that you'd be talking to and research on the program. How did you even get the idea to do that? And then what kind of research did you do And then 3-part question. I'll tell you these again if I'm giving you too much.
Okay.
How did that research show through when you actually did the interview? 3 questions. You got all 3? You say them again?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll start. I'll start with the first one.
All right.
The idea of the preparation, I think, is I just believe the preparation in anything you do is what sets you apart from people. That's in any profession. That's anything you do. So, like, I got the idea because I just wanted to be the most prepared candidate. So I just wanted to have all kinds of layers to me. Knowing that I was going to meet with so many people would come at me from different angles. I wanted to have all those angles and all those bases covered. So I would be on the website, I would say 12, 13 hours total. I would just click, whatever it is, click about us, and I would just read everything, and I would just take notes. I would click the president's link, look everything, take notes. I would click on the strategic program of the university, strategic plan, of the university, take notes on those 5 things that they're trying to do in the next 5 years. I would click on this person's bio and try to match it to anybody that I might know that might be able to reach out to this person to advocate on my behalf, whether it be through email or whatever. So the preparation is just something that I feel like comes with anything. So like you're interviewing with somebody, you need to know everything about them in and out. So I try to know everything about that university that I could, because I just think the preparation of everything kind of sets yourself apart. What was the second part, Dre?
So the first one was, I got to remember now. So the first one was, how'd you get the idea to do that research? Then the second one was, what researches you did? So you kind of answered both. And the third one was, how did that research show when you actually were sitting down talking to these people?
Yeah, so I'll go a little bit deeper into number 2. Like when you're talking about, like I knew 5 of the people on the committee, so I would go read their bios. I know every stop that they had made. So like I made myself a booklet. It was probably about 20 pages long. And every person had like their page, and I had every stop that they've been on. And I would just try to connect the dots. So, if I knew somebody that worked at, just say, the University of Colorado Springs, and they did in the same times, I would say, hey, did you know John Hayes? And like, oh yeah, hey, could you drop him an email? I'm gonna be interviewing for the men's basketball job. And part of that goes to treating people right. You can't do any things I'm talking about if you don't treat people right when you're reaching out genuinely. So that's kind of how I try to take the preparation level, and then the way that you can show that is in the questions that get asked. You can just, like, when you talk about being prepared and over prepared, when somebody asks you a question, you can sprinkle things in that can attest to their background. So just say I was, for instance, Randy, our number 2, who's on our number 1. She was an All-American here at Western, and she ran track. So me knowing that, she asked me how my day was. She was the first person I met with. And I was like, one of the things I sprinkled in was like, hey, I got my morning run in. I know you were All-American here. I didn't quite have the pace that you did, but I still got my run in. So that tells her right away that I've done research on her, and that lets people know that, number 1, this dude is serious. Number 2, it lets them know that you have interest in them. And then it's just going to be reciprocated, because then they're going to have more interest in you. Like, hey, well, I might know your resume, but now I want to know you a little bit more since you know that about me. Mm-hmm. And then when you do that to everybody that you come across, like that was just my first meeting. So then I had a chance to sit down with my president on the interview for 30 minutes. So I reviewed our strategic plan and knew that they were going to do renovations. Dre, you've been in our gym. I think the day you was in there, we had it popping pretty good. But they're going to do a renovation to our gym in 2022. So when I was sitting down with him, one of the questions that I asked him, I was like, hey, what does the renovation look like, or what will change? And like his eyes kind of like glazed me over, like, oh, okay, this dude just read the strategic plan. So I also knew people in his president's cabinet and everything else like that. And I think that's kind of how you can like work those things in. And people take interest in that, to be honest. Like when you know that somebody's doing research on you, like obviously I know Dre in and out. But if I'm coming on his podcast and I know that he played at Altoona and he played for Armin Gilliam, I might throw in a Hammer joke. Mm. Like he knows who the Hammer is, but somebody else might not. So I might just throw something like that in. But I think part of that just goes into your preparation and anything that you're trying to do that you're really serious about.
So I hope everybody was listening to what the last 5 minutes right there, Wes. You could package that up and sell it for somebody who's trying to get a job. I'm dead serious, because that right there, the time that you took, you said you made a 20-page booklet about this job that you said even after the interview, you felt you had maybe a 20% chance of getting the job. But you put together a 20-page booklet ahead of time just so that they knew that you knew what they were about, and you wanted to make sure they knew that you knew that. That's some thorough research work right there. And one of the things that you mentioned, you got personal with Randy. You mentioned that she had ran track, and something like that you didn't have to know and had nothing to do with the job itself. She will probably never forget you because you brought that up, right, on your own. Right. Even if y'all never worked together again, she'll never forget you because you knew that about her up front. And that's some thorough shit, what you just said right there. So my question is, I'm not sure you answered it exactly, is how do you even get the idea to do that? Because a lot of people show up to job interviews and they just answer the questions. How did you get the idea to do that extra work up front?
Well, I figured why not? They gave me a list of people that I was going to meet with. So in my mind, it was just the next step. They told me the 5 people that were going to be on the search committee that I would spend the majority of the time with. So for me, going into that preparation and like the actual idea, it's just something that kind of came to me. I was like, well, I should know these people inside and out, because the original piece of it was I wanted to know if I knew or had connections to anybody that they knew. That was an initial. Mm-hmm. So then when you start off, you're doing the research. You're just trying to say, like, if people know that me and Dre are connected, then eventually, if Dre, you'd be like, oh, Wes, him and Wes were college teammates. Let me reach out to Wes. And that's initially what I was doing. So then with that just comes that level of research. And then everybody, when you're going for a job, like, you're trying to find ways to distinguish yourself amongst the other candidates. And I think that level of preparation is one of the things that can. If you're going to do a speech and you're just prepared to the bare minimum, like, you might still be able to give a good speech. But if you're over prepared, you can just start throwing stuff in there, stuff that make people laugh, stuff that make people think. And that just tells people about your preparation level. So I just wanted to try to, and this might be completely off topic, but every time that I meet somebody, knowing that people make snap judgments, I want people to leave away from an interaction with myself with a wow factor, like, wow. Like, I don't know much about that dude. It could be if I meet you in the supermarket. But I would want somebody to want to get on to Google and be like, yo, who the hell is Wes Pifer, from the interaction that we had. So that just goes to my preparation level. Hopefully I answered the question. It can help people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so you and everybody else knows, nothing is off topic on the Work on Your Game show. Everything's the topic. So whatever you want to add in to answer any question, we can go that route. But one of the things that you said there, and I noticed you said it a couple times, and you even mentioned this before when I was asking you about how you had advanced in the coaching industry, is that you mentioned seeing if you knew anyone that they knew. So how much, since you mentioned that, how much of the coaching business, if you could put a percentage on it, when it comes to getting jobs, moving up, et cetera, is relationships versus actual coaching skill?
I'll probably say 85%. 85% is like who you know in the relationships. I mean, to be honest, I think that goes to a lot of professions. Mm. One of the things when I was going through this process, I spoke with a number of people that I know between agents, search firms. They asked, and the thing that kept coming back is when you're looking at somebody who's going to potentially hire you, from those things like, do I know you? Number 1. Do I like you? Number 2. Are you the best? Number 3.
Wow. Wait, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Number 1, do I know you?
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, do I like you? Number 3, are you the best? And
I like that.
So number 1, when you're sitting in front of somebody, like, people, that's myself included, because I hire people now. People are gonna hire people from certain backgrounds, and a lot of times they want to, do I know you? I'm not hiring nobody I don't know. For somebody that's going to be an in-person job that I'm going to work with every day, I want to know either do I know you or does somebody really, really close to me know you that can vouch for you. So in coaching, I probably got 8 really, really close-knit friends. So if you don't know me or you don't know those 8 guys, you probably don't got a chance at getting on my radar for me to hire you as an assistant on my staff. And I'm guessing almost all leaders are like that. They want to hire people that they know. Number 2, do I like you? That just makes sense. Do I like you? I'm sitting here. Do I like you? Are people gonna like you? Are people in this office gonna like you? And then number three, are you the best? I think that speaks for itself. Are you the best candidate for this? And then why are you best? Can you convey why you're the best for this? And everything else like that. So I looked at those three questions and I wanted to have them answered to a T for my position here at Western.
Man, that do I know you? Do I like you? I might make an episode just off that framework right there, Wes. So you'll know that you, besides this episode, you're gonna be responsible for an episode of the Work on Your Game show. But moving on from that, well, still on that, you talked about how many candidates, 200 plus candidates for the head coaching job, and I remember at Penn State Altoona, right before you got there, when the coach who had recruited me, Kenny Macklin, was removed before Armin Gilliam came in, the coach who brought you in. I saw the athletic director at Altoona in the summertime because I was there in the summer, and I asked her, hey, how's the coaching search going? And she said we had like 300 applicants. It was something like that. And this is for a D3 job. You're at a D2. So this is for a D3 job at Altoona for a program at Penn State Altoona that didn't really seem like they took basketball serious, but they had all these candidates for that head coaching job. So for you to be able to get that job, to what do you attribute your progress, even from when you first started coaching all the way up to now? I mean, you've answered a lot of it already, but is there anything else that you want to add for anyone who's trying to advance either in your industry or any other to what you attribute your progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shout out to Ferdina. She was one of my mentors when I first came in. She helped me out before she retired.
Who is Ferdina, by the way, because we don't know who that is?
She's the AD. She was the AD when we was at Altoona.
Okay.
So she was the number one, and then Brent was number two.
Okay.
But she gave me advice. I reached out to her right when I first got into the game, so she gave me a little bit of advice to help me before she was out the door. Okay. But as far as the question you asked, and it's basically like how you can progress. You know, the advice that I would give, I'm probably giving out too much stuff because it's really the blueprint of how I've been successful. I don't know if I want to give it to everybody, but Dre, my man, and, you know, I came on the podcast. So
only 10% of people are going to actually listen anyway. So go ahead.
Listen, you got to be, well, if you listen at this point, you get some gold. Like, you got to be really, really intentional about the development of your career. And I feel like that's in anything. So number one, you got to study the people who are where you want to be. You got to study those people. Dre calls them virtual mentors. I YouTube people. I cold call people. I email people in the positions that I want to be in. And I study them. Whether that be when we're on the road recruiting, whether that be watching games, like I really study those people to try to get just a little bit of information that they don't even got to tell me, something that I might be able to pick up. And then when I say being intentional about it is from my track to assistant to associate, there's a chunk of things right here that I needed to get done. Number one, how do you make it? Talk to the people who have done that before. Number two, okay, a lot of it comes from trust from your head coach. How do you develop that trust from your head coach? Boom, I got to do that. How can I be intentional about those things right here? How can I show value to my head coach? Like, in anything that you do, you always got to be working on yourself, but there's a difference in working for yourself and working on yourself. Working for yourself is selfish. Working on yourself brings value to any organization that you're a part of. That's anything. So when you're working on yourself, that's reading books, that's going to seminars, that's working on yourself. That's going to continue to provide value from anybody that's working with you and people that you're working for. So I just try to do that. And when I say being intentional about it is how much time you spent. Just like for me, it was always 30 minutes that I call building my brand every single day. So that could be, from a coaching standpoint, that could be 30 minutes set aside for reading. That could be 30 minutes set aside for developing relationships, sending out text messages. That could be 30 minutes of handwritten notes to people that I need to get in contact with that I would, just showing them a gesture. That could be 30 minutes of drawing on the board with our zone offense. That could be 30 minutes of watching somebody with a zone defense. That could be 30 minutes of offense. That could be 30 minutes of side out of bounds plays that I would run when I was a head coach. And I would just be intentional about that time. And then for that time, that 30 minutes, my phone was away. There was nothing that would distract me from that 30 minutes. So then I always felt like I was getting the most out of that 30 minutes. And that's kind of how I was being intentional. And then when you talk about going from an associate to a head coach, Like, people think a lot of the times it's basketball related, and it's not. You know, I went from being a basketball coach to a CEO. And as a CEO, you're looking down at your thing from 50,000 feet. For 15 years, I had looked at it from one level. So I needed to know and understand what went into being a head coach, a lot more stuff. Now you're talking about overall program management. Now you're talking about operating budget, stuff that I had no experience with. But now in that 30 minutes, you know, if I talk to a head coach and they're like, hey, you know, I went over budget by $20,000, and I do what Dre is doing right now. Like, this, I don't know if this is where the interview's supposed to go, but like, I would just start asking questions. What was the budget? How did you go over budget? What would you do different? And I would just be writing that stuff down. And I think a lot of that goes into having strong mentorship. And then when you're, while I'm on my advice soapbox, like when you're able to get with somebody and get a hold of somebody who's advanced further than you at that point, and you're trying to pick their brain, ask them a question and shut the hell up. Take down a pen and just write notes. And as much as they give you, ask for more until they don't give any more. Because just like I'm doing podcasts because me and Dre are brothers, but I'm also doing it because I want to help people. And a lot of the times when you're involved with people who are mentors, they want to help people. They want to help people achieve to the same level that they are. I'm a head coach, so I want other people to be head coaches. I want other people to listen to this to be CEOs or to be at the top level. And this is kind of how you do it. But like when you're with somebody, ask them number one, don't ask them a question. I'm on my soapbox, Dre. I'm sorry. Listen, don't ask them a question. Don't ask somebody when you're in a position of you trying to get information from somebody. Don't ask them a question that you could have researched by looking at their bio. So like if you get on the phone with me and you want to be a basketball coach, don't ask me what my stock was before Western Oregon. You should know everything about me already. You should know that I was at NAU, Central, St. Andrews, junior college, started in high school, played it professionally. You should know all that before you ask me one question about helping you out. The second that somebody asks like that, asks me a question, I'm off the conversation. I'm going to give them some bullshit answer and then it's done. So when you're on the phone with a person like that of substance, do research on that person before you get on. And then it goes back to what I was talking about in the interview. Then you can just throw stuff in to let them know that you already did work on that. And then once you do get them on the phone, ask them questions of substance, something that's going to make them think, something that's going to separate you from the 5 other people that they might talk to over the next week that are in the same position as you. And then shut the hell up and let them answer. And then when they answer, take as many notes as you can. And then by the next time you talk to that person, be able to reference some of the stuff and then say how you used it. Because like if you get on the phone with me and I give you something that I think is really good and you don't do shit with it, okay, that the next conversation is probably not going to happen. But if you drop me a text and be like, yo, Wes, you know, you dropped the book Atomic Habits on me. Hey, I'm on page 57. What have you done with that as far as your program? I'm like, okay, this person is serious. And I don't even know where we started at with the question, Dre, but that's where you are now. My bad.
No, it's perfect. That's perfect. So you mentioned one of the things that you said a lot there, but one of the things that stood out to me is that you said sometimes you would cold call people for information and help, and people that you looked up to or people who you felt like might have something that you needed. And most people are deathly afraid of direct one-to-one conversation, especially with somebody that they don't know and somebody that they believe may be at a higher position than them. So how did you even go about doing that? And if there is anyone that you'd be willing to mention, who is somebody that you did cold call and how did that conversation go?
No, I mean, I just think that's a way that you can kind of separate yourself. I mean, what's the worst that person can tell you? No, not answer your call, not call you back. You know, I do it because I heard Kobe Bryant talk about it early in his career. He said that like if he thought that somebody was the best at something, he would just try to get on the phone with them. So that's what I did. One person I cold called was Allen Edwards, who's now one of my best mentors. At the time, he was the head coach of Wyoming. You know, there's a level above where I was at NAU. I just cold called him because I got his number. I mean, a lot of the times you're a level off somebody that you can get to know that can help you. So I just cold called him. And we talked on the phone for, probably 2-3 minutes, introduced myself, and that was it. But I followed back up with him with an email, had his number then. So then he knew that I was intentional because he would give me stuff. And when I said give me, he would just give me information. But I would just follow back up with him. Like, hey, this is kind of what happened from the last thing that you told me. He told me about a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, which is one of my favorite books at this moment. So he just gave me the book in passing. I read the book. So now I asked him the question on, like, how did you do that with your program? And he went into a 30-minute spiel about how he had put that into his program. I didn't know. I just asked him a question that led to a 30-minute, just him talking. From there, I established a relationship. And now, when you're calling people like that, they know you're not some full of shit person. So now, what used to be a 2-3 minute conversation has now stretched to 5 to 10 minutes. Because now I'm on the phone with somebody of substance. I know this person is going to do something with the information that I'm giving them. Now, that comes into the next time, I'm going to ask him another question, and another question, and be quiet. Then it comes into, now he wants to know more about you. Now they want to know more about you. Like, okay, so why the hell is this dude pecking me with questions? Let me figure out something about him. And now it turns into a relationship. But, the cold call thing, I'm not in sales, but what's the worst they can do? Not call you back? Like, am I missing something? Not call you back? Or be rude to you when they get on the phone? People gonna be rude to you in the supermarket. I mean, you just gotta get over stuff like that. People gonna tell you no. You gotta get over that phobia. I mean, it's really not that bad either way.
One thing you mentioned going back a little bit, you said that when you first got into coaching, you reached out to Fredina, who was the athletic director at Penn State Altoona when we were playing at Penn State Altoona. There's a couple things I want to talk about with that, because this will also be relevant to the players who are playing now. Because, first of all, before we get to that, what did you ask her and what did she tell you?
I mean, it was really basic. I told her I wanted to get into college coaching. I wanted to get her thoughts on me and getting into college coaching. And I just wanted to see if she could connect me with anybody else that can help me. I mean, anytime that when people don't think you have an advantage if you played in college, but you do. Like, you can immediately reach out to the people who are then in your administration and all the coaches that you played against. And if there's any people who played with you or you played against the guy in the coaching, you got a background to start yourself off right there. So that's kind of where I started it, with like the bare knuckles. Like we talk about Fredina, she was AD. I just dropped her a line and told her those things and got her input. Then she can do with it what she likes, but now she at least knows that I want to try to get into this profession.
All right. So now when it comes to that, you reaching out to Fredina and asking that question, we can draw a parallel here. Let's just say that I had decided I wanted to be a coach and I had reached out to Fredina. I don't know. I mean, I carried myself a little bit differently around that campus than maybe you did. And I was there a little bit longer than you. So I don't know. She might have not have took my call. But good thing is I didn't go in the same direction that you went. And it's all good. Everybody's unique. But for the players who are playing now today, how they conduct themselves today as a player, how would it affect if they decide to get into coaching and they want to reach back out to their former coaches or the athletic directors or people who might have been watching them and they weren't even aware they were being watched? How would that affect what opportunities they'll have moving forward in the future with something that they're not even thinking about right now?
Oh, it's major. It's major. Like, I'll tell you this. Like, and when you're talking about who I got, do I know you? Do I like you the best? The same person told me, everybody, you're being interviewed every day in every interaction. That's everybody. No matter if you're on campus, like right now, as a student athlete, people are looking at you. Like, you're always being interviewed. So for the short answer to that, anybody that's like perceived as like a jerk or an ass on the court, that's the only thing I know about you. So if I show up to coach that game, like Dre and them came to the Fairbanks game and they came to the Anchorage game. So I don't know those student athletes other than inside the film that I watch. But if I watch film and I see you kick a ball away from a ref, or I see you always like jawing with the ref or jawing with the other team, or talking SHIT to our bench and stuff like that, I'm just going to think you're a jerk and keep it moving. So when your career is done, if you reach out to me, that's spam, to be honest. How you carry yourself and how you carry yourself is everything, and it goes through everything you do. Because if you look at the guys, and this might jump off topic, if you look at the guys in the NBA who are now assistants in the NBA, a lot of those guys were not all stars, the best players. A lot of them were role guys AKA Steady Eddies, who treated people in the organization the right way, because just like in everything, the people who start at the bottom eventually end up at the top. So they treated the equipment guy, the video guy, who now become an assistant, who now become a head coach. They treated those guys the best. Then they become assistants. So I just think how you treat people is so much of the battle. And that's one of the things I try to instill in our guys out here.
So as far as, okay, if we talk about now with you being a head coach, if we move into that area, what is it like? I mean, I got a lot of questions that we're going to go into detail with this, but just generally speaking, what is it like now being on top of your own program? You've talked about a few things already, but is there anything you want to say about that? Just being a head coach, for anyone who's a coach right now and they want to get there, what should they expect?
Just you can expect daily fires. I mean, it ups your organization level, because for myself, I'm supervising 2 assistants and a graduate assistant, and I'm the overall operations on program. So my job really is to get 20 people on the same page, 20 grown men on the same page with different minds, different backgrounds, different upcomings, like trying to get them on the same page, organized, to practice at the same time, whether that be to a flight at the same time. And you're trying to do that. And it's a really hard job, so you got to get your organizational and your management skills together, because what motivates one of my assistants might not be what motivates one of my other assistants. How I talk to Dre as a coach and how I coach him could be completely different from how I coach Brandon Battles. And I think that's what the best leaders and the CEOs do from a coaching standpoint. Like, just say we're in a meeting. There's certain people in that meeting that you can just jump on their ass and you can just ride them. Michael Jordan just rides people. There's certain people you can do that to, and they respond to it. They're like, yes, I need that. I needed that kicking my ass in front of everybody to get me going to what I'm supposed to be doing. And you can find somebody just as good as them that you can't say anything to them in front of people, because they would just shut down. So you needed everybody else to go away from that meeting space, and you need to talk to them in a one-on-one basis, like I'm talking to you guys, in a nice, calm voice. Then you might have another person who can take it in front of everybody, but you might have to dog cuss this person out in front of everybody to jumpstart them. And what you learning is how you can deal with people and how you can get the best out of people. And until you sit at the top of it, the only person you're leading is really yourself. So like, okay, I got to structure my day. I want to do these 10 things today. When you're at the top, you're trying to structure everybody's day to maximize everything that you guys are trying to get done as a unit. So hopefully that answered that, Dre.
Definitely. What have you experienced as a head coach that you did not expect to experience?
Oh man, that's a great question. I'll tell you when you're talking about organization level, when I first took the job, I was going back and forth between Arizona and Oregon. And we had one gym out here in Lupie, a really nice facility. But us, women's basketball and volleyball, all used the facility. So I got an email or a text, one of the two, from those other head coaches, and they wanted to meet with me about the gym schedule for the fall. That's talking about like May, and they wanted to meet about stuff that's going to happen in September. But, my first 2-3 weeks on the job, I had no idea. I was like, yeah, let's meet about it. So I go into that meeting, long story short, I'm completely unprepared to talk about something that was going to happen that far in advance. I had no idea that was really part of my job. So they're coming into it. I'm coming in with a notepad thinking that we're going to talk like we're talking on the podcast. And they had their ladies' schedules already. They had when their ladies were going to lift. They had their preferred times. They had their ladies' class schedules. And I didn't have any of that. And I walked out of that meeting like a rag doll. We had the worst practice time. We had the worst weight room time because their head coach was completely unprepared. It was kind of like a big slap in the face, like, you better get it together. But I had no idea that I had to be that organized, thinking about stuff that was going to happen months in advance.
So as a head coach, you mentioned here already multiple times that you've leaned on other resources and other people that either you knew or didn't know. What have been the most important resources that you've leaned on as a head coach to help shorten your learning curve so stuff like that doesn't happen?
I think that you have as a leader, you got to get vulnerable and point out your mistakes and self-evaluate yourself all the time. Had I had that as a blind spot going in again, that's on me. So the answer to that was the people that have been in your positions all the time before you, try to reach out and get advice like that. Like if I told that story, we'll keep using Allen because he's a great mentor to me. But like when I told him that story, he laughed for a minute straight. He's like, "Oh man, let me tell you this one." So then when he started telling me that one, guess what I did? I wrote it down so it wouldn't happen to me. And I was like, you take stuff like that and those experiences, and somebody else's, you could say failures, and you use those, but you ask them, you give them the story because everybody likes a storyteller, and then you kind of get that stuff back. But I leaned on my mentors heavily. I told them sometimes when I felt overwhelmed with the job, they gave me some advice on what they did when they felt overwhelmed with the job. And one of the things after my first year as a head coach, when I talk to people who've been in my position, one of the questions I've been asking all pandemic is, can you tell me some things that you think you struggled in your first year as a head coach and how you would get better in year two, or how did you get better? And I just took those answers, wrote them down, and put them in a book, and I study that so I don't fall into those same things. And if I'm better than that, I'm like, hey, I already had that written down, but that's great stuff. But you start to get some of the pitfalls that happen. But I think a lot of it's having people that you can reach out to and just bounce questions off of.
You mentioned several times here that you've reached out to other people and, like you just said, bounce questions off of them. And Alan, who you mentioned, you two didn't work in the same program at the same time. So of the head coaches in all your years as an assistant, all the head coaches that you did work under, whose examples or lessons do you use the most now as a head coach that you learned from when you were working in their programs?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a dandy of a question.
It can be more than one person.
This is the thing. Mm-hmm. I learned what I would do and what I didn't do from every stop that I've been on. I had a book on everything that happened from my coaching experience. So I guess you can put it to any job. So like any way that somebody did something that I liked, I wrote it down. Anything that somebody did something I didn't like, that they didn't like, I wrote it down. Stuff that I thought they would. I like. If somebody did wiffle ball one day, I was like, man, that's a great idea. And if somebody did something I thought was terrible and stupid, I wrote that down. And what I compiled was a thing about 300 pages. Now, this could be plays that I liked doing a scout report. This can be, hey, I didn't like going to pregame meal here, or I liked us eating together, or I didn't like us eating together, or I liked us getting to the plane at this time. I wrote all that stuff down. And what I took from at North Carolina Central, a championship program, was just the culture and the daily habits of a champion. And that's some of the same stuff that I instill out here. We were LaVelle Moulton as a head coach, he was always just so dialed into the goal of winning the championship. There was rarely things that could get him away from that. He was so dialed in. And because of it, the staff was dialed in. Because the staff was dialed in, the players were dialed in. And because of that, we won a championship. But it started at the top. So that's what I took from him. And one of the things about coach was like he was always driven. He would never let us settle. He didn't tell me I was a great assistant coach until I left, because there was always more. Whatever I did, there was always another level. And when you're a competitor, you like that. But no matter if I won a scout and we was the most prepared, he wouldn't let me dwell on that. He wouldn't be like, hey, great job. He'd be like, all right, now your next scout. Now you got Bethune-Cookman. Figure those guys out. So there was always another level to what coach was doing. And I just love that. So that would be probably the biggest thing that I took away, that I brought to us. And then I stole stuff along the way from everybody. I feel like the best stuff in anything you're doing is stolen. Success leaves footprints, so find them. And then when you find them, cold call them and see why they did it. Figure out why they did it.
Right. But, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay. So when I go to a basketball game nowadays, like knowing that people like yourself and some other people that I know and some of our even players that we played with in college, a lot of players have gone on to become coaches. So now I pay a little bit more attention to coaches, and I look at coaches' styles and I see how they're talking to the refs and how they deal with their players. During a game, when I watch a basketball game, especially in person, I like watching the coaches just see how they do. Because I remember watching, Phil Jackson. He was coaching the Bulls and the Lakers. He would just sit there with his legs crossed. And no matter what happened, he'd just sit there. And then you got other coaches who they're, not in the pros as much, but in college, there are coaches who, run up and down the sidelines screaming and yelling. And and then there are coaches who are somewhere in between. So when you're coaching a game, how did you know what your style was going to be? Like when you became head coach and then the first game came around, how'd you know if you're going to be the coach who is like more on the Phil Jackson side, to sit there and watch calmly, or are you going to be one of the screaming coaches that I mentioned? I remember I went to a Georgia Tech game and I saw this guy Josh Pastner screaming ridiculously all game, and it was just hilarious to me. But how do you know what your style is going to be on the sideline during the game?
Like for me, it's I just knew it because I knew how I was as a player. Like I just always try to be even killed. And as a leader, when you're leading people, I feel like they're going to have the temperature and the pulse of you. So if I'm running around like a crazy maniac in the last minute of the game, that's probably how your team is going to act. Like they're not going to be able to execute. They're not going to know what play they're running. You'll be sweating. So I always try to keep the same even killed temperament. Never too high, never too low. And that's just how I was as a player. I feel like those teams, like you talk about Phil Jackson, those teams were always, they just had a certain, we both read Kobe Mike stuff, like they just had a certain zen about themselves. Like they just knew and understood. And I felt like the coaches who yell and the coaches who are going back and forth like that, their teams are almost like chaotic in those times when you got to be like really, really grounded. When somebody goes on a 6-0 run, how are you acting in the timeout? Like, are you jumping up and down, screaming like a madman? Or you're like, hey, all right, the next 6-0 run is ours. Let's organize ourselves. So I kind of knew how I was going to be. Once again, you learn and you work with guys and you see how guys react to certain things. And then you kind of act accordingly. So.
Okay. Did you ever have to?
Hold on. Let me jump in for a little bit right here because Coach might listen. So Josh Pastner, he came in. He was a guy I looked to early in my career because they recruited guys out of Miami-Dade. So he said coach was like yelling.
Can you give us some context for, first of all, tell us who Josh is and why'd you mention Miami-Dade for people that don't know?
Yeah, so Josh Pastner is now the head coach at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
So when I was at Miami-Dade, I think he was assistant at Memphis at the time. He would come down to Miami-Dade and recruit guys because we had high-level junior college players. And, Will Coleman actually went to Memphis. So I developed a relationship with Coach off that. So Coach and Jack Murphy, who I worked for at Northern Arizona, they're best friends. So I think they were roommates together at Arizona, working up underneath Lou Olson. So Coach was a good coach, but Coach was a runner and a screamer at the refs. And one of my jobs was like, I was always the sense of calm, like in our timeouts, like Coach would get so mad at the refs. And like right before we'd have a coaches meeting, just say like an under 16-minute timeout, we would meet together as coaches before the head coach would go talk to the team. Right. But one of the biggest things that I thought I brought the coach was like just that sense of calm, because he would get so worked up with the refs. He could have been running down here yelling. He'd come back in. He'd be like, that guy, And like one of the biggest things I thought I brought the coach was like in that moment I could be like, Coach, it's good, man. Just let it go. Like, we're okay. You got to get your team together. They need to know we're running coming out. And he just like, Then he go talk to the guys. But Coach was a runner. So you hear Josh is a yeller. Coach was a runner and a yeller too. But I think one of the things I brought the coach was kind of like that common sense, like try to calm him down a little bit.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm the one who brought that up because I told this story on the show years ago. I went to a game in Miami where I live. It was University of Miami against Georgia Tech, and I didn't know who Josh Pastner was, and we happened to be sitting right behind Georgia Tech's bench, and they had like 10 coaches. And I remember as soon as the game started, all you heard was him because it wasn't that loud in the arena, and he was just screaming no matter what happened. If they scored, he was quiet. But if anything other than that happened, this guy was just screaming every single play. And I'm like, why is he screaming like that? And it was just funny to me. I didn't even know that Josh and your head coach, Jack Murphy at NAU, I didn't even know they knew each other. I just brought it up on the show. And for those listening, for y'all to have context, Wes hit me up after he heard it. And he was like, it's funny that you say that because Josh Pastner and my head coach are friends. And I didn't even know that. It was just a really funny thing to me. So shout out to Josh Pastner if he's listening. You doing your thing. You got players playing for you, so something's working. But Wes, in your first year as head coach, did you ever have to cuss out a referee? Did you get any technical fouls? You get thrown out of any games?
Nah, it's just it's not my personality. Like the thing that I think, number one, my first year as a head coach, no technical fouls. I don't even think I got a warning. It's just not my personality. I think that number one, we love basketball because it's an imperfect game. Not every shot's gonna go in. Not everything's gonna go your way. I think a lot of things, how you act in life and coaching are parallel. So like how you act when stuff don't go your way. So for me, I'm more adept to have a conversation with a ref at a timeout versus berate and yell them. And I think because they're people too. We tell our guys all the time, your professors are people, refs are people. I'd rather have a conversation with them just like we are. And I think they respect that so much more than somebody just yelling at them or trying to cuss at them or jumping up and down. And I think that helps us kind of like later with the referees. They know the rapport that I have with them. They know I'm going to treat them with respect. And if I do get upset, I think they know and understand that, hey, something's not right. If Wes is like upset and mad and cussing, like something's not right here because he don't act like that.
So do any of your players get technical fouls? And if they did or they do, how do you respond to it?
So this year, my first game as a head coach against Hawaii Hilo, one of my best players, Cameron Cranston, got a technical foul for jawing at the ref, coming to the bench for his fourth foul in the second half. Number one, they know that's not how we act. So he got a technical foul this year. A kid that doesn't play for us got a technical foul for hanging on the rim this year. And then actually one of my assistants got a technical foul this year for arguing the call from the bench. So for the guys to get a text, they know that that's not how we act. So then, both guys apologized. One guy in the first half, he apologized at halftime to the guys even before I came in. And then Cam apologized to the guys after. And then they just got to complete like a really testy run. We call it 6:22s and 6:17s. If you get a technical foul, it's punishment.
What does that mean? Can you explain to the audience who may be uninitiated what that is, what you just said?
Yeah, so a 22 is the length of a basketball court. So you're going down, baseline to baseline, baseline to baseline. You got to finish it in 22 seconds. A 17 is now shift the court this way. Now you got to run this side 17 times in a minute, touching every line. So sideline to sideline 17 times in a minute. So you'll get whatever you ran. So say you ran a 22, you get 22 seconds of rest. Then you got another run, another 22. And then the same thing with the minute run. You got a minute running, minute rest, minute run.
So a 22, how many times up and down do you have to do it? In 22
Four.
Seconds?
So that'd be 4 touches.
Okay, so down and back, the length of the court, full court twice in 22 seconds.
Yes.
And then the 17 is the width of the court. You got to touch the line. 17 touches of the line, and you get 1 minute.
Yep.
And that one's pretty challenging. I think I could do the 22. I don't know about the 17. 17 is tough. But that's the penalty you're saying for a technical foul?
Yep.
Okay. Did you make your assistant coach do the 17 for getting the tech?
I didn't make him do it. He was very, very apologetic. I didn't make him do it.
All right. So of all the head coaches that you had as a player, from youth to high school, college, pro, who of them had the most influence on what you do now as a head coach, positive or negative?
I mean, the only one that I would take something positive for, to be honest, was my head coach in high school. He was just more of like he was a sports medicine teacher. He really wasn't he was the basketball coach, but he really wasn't the basketball coach. So he cared more about the relationships than I feel like any coach that I played for in college did. Like, he still checks on me to this day. So I would say him. And the rest of them, they affected my collegiate experience negatively, but they affect my student athletes positively, if that makes sense. Like, I played for guys in college who didn't give you confidence. If anything, they felt like their coaching was, they felt by challenging you, they were helping you. And by cussing you out and trying to belittle you. They felt like that was coaching. And because of it, I felt like guys on our team didn't have high level of confidence, to be honest. And I think it showed on the court. So now, as a head coach, I remember those experiences. I never want my student athletes to feel like that. It's the complete opposite. I want my student athletes to feel like world beaters. I want them to know that there's not a play, a pass, or a shot that their head coach thinks that they can't make. I want to give our guys so much confidence that they walk in the gym that they feel like, okay, we ready, we set to go after this one right here. And try to give them stuff that I don't feel like that we had in college. Dre, you might have and B and Ethan and TP and Blake, they could have totally different viewpoints on where we came from. But my senior year, I was the point guard. Coach didn't give me a lot of confidence.
So the coach we're referring to is Armin Gilliam, who is he passed away about a decade ago, but he was our coach at Penn State Altoona, and I've talked about that on the show many times. That his style was I believe he was channeling, or at least he thought he was channeling Bobby Knight, who is a legendary coach who doesn't coach anymore. But for those old enough to remember, Bobby Knight was known as the general. He was kind of like an intimidating type of guy, and he had some success. So that's what kind of made it. That's where the conflict came in, because a lot of coaches tried to mimic Bobby Knight's style, but they didn't have Bobby Knight's success. So why do you think that was, Wes? So what was your impression of our coach in college? And because he talked about Bobby Knight. I mean, the day that he kicked me out the gym, he was mentioning Bobby Knight. So how was Bobby Knight able to succeed in that style? But then when coaches tried to be like him, they did not succeed.
Well, I think a lot of it is you have to, like, when you're coaching, I think you have to be yourself. I think you're going to struggle if you're trying to be somebody aside from yourself. Now, coach might be trying to channel his inner Bobby Knight, but maybe that's how Bobby Knight is all the time. So if you're trying to be like Bobby Knight on the court and then off the court, you're being yourself, then your guys have a complete contradiction on who you are. So maybe that's what it was. But like coach, I think coach, when he spent like 2 days with Bobby Knight. He came back with all this stuff trying to do what Bobby Knight did. Like, you're not Bobby Knight. Like, and I think that's the thing. You can't be somebody that you're not. So he would come back and try to do those things, and yeah, it just wasn't good.
So Wes, nowadays as a head coach, we're in a different era, obviously. What do you tell your players about social media?
I try to give them what I would call a crash course on social media. We have those guys sign social media contracts. I don't know a lot. I don't have a Snapchat, but I got an Instagram, Facebook, and a Twitter. But our rules with that are simple, because they can start our student athletes, what I try to get them to understand, they can start their branding right now. As far as like how they're branding themselves and what people are thinking about them. So when I say social media contract, we got a couple of things. I tell those guys, don't post anything that you wouldn't want your mom or your grandmother to see. That's my number one rule. So if you wouldn't want your mom to bring it up at the dinner table, you shouldn't put that on your social media. I tell them never to speak in a negative manner about referees after a game, or a negative manner about your teammates or a program. Don't do it. I tell my guys, don't use curse words, don't use the N word. And I also tell them, don't retweet anything that has cuss words or the N word in it. Anything that could be looked at as like violence towards women or anything else like that. You shouldn't have any of that stuff. I'm all for you being yourself and showing your personality. You can do those things without highlighting any of the things that I've told them. Because, at this day and age, it's crazy, but like you see people going back to their college and people be using that stuff against them now. Like you could tweet something, even the dude Mike Gundy, like they went back to something that happened to that dude in like 1981 when there was no social media or anything else like that brought up. Right. So I try to use instances like that with our guys, like you don't want that to hinder you from getting a job playing professionally, because they're gonna look at your social media and everything else like that. So don't have anything on there that could hinder your next opportunity.
All right, because now we have everybody has a footprint now. Everything you do there's a receipt for it, as opposed to, not even 15 years ago, there weren't these receipts. So now we all got receipts. So players may soon be able to make money from their image and likeness. And I don't know how this is going to affect players at every level of college, but it's going to be available for everybody, allegedly, once all the bills and laws get passed. So how do you feel about that as a college coach for college players?
My thoughts on it, there's going to be some things between Title IX that are going to have to level it off between men and women. But I mean, I like the idea of them being able to profit off their likeness. Because once again, that's their brand. And for me, it could change. But like, I feel like these universities really profit off the stuff more than student athletes. And I don't think that's quite right. I think they should have an opportunity to have a seat at the table. And my further to that would be, when you look at guys who have had violations, would they have had violations if they could profit off their likeness? You look at somebody like a Reggie Bush who gets blackballed from USC for 10 years for maybe taking stuff. I don't know the logistics of it, but if he could do that, would he have done the things that they said that he did? And I think that's a conversation that's got to be had as well. But I'm for it. I think they should be able to have that as part of their brand. And I think the university and some of the companies shouldn't be the only people to be able to make money off those guys.
Have you and your staff or the athletic department at your school had any conversations about that yet? Have you had to start making plans for it?
Nah, nothing yet.
Okay, so generally you do think players should be able to make money from their likeness, or even if they were to, let's say, one of the boosters or someone who's a fan of your program, they just want to get them a summer job so that they can make some money, or just put some money in their pocket because they just want to help the player out. You think that if that's allowed, then, I mean, it's no harm, no foul. Nobody's actually being hurt by it, which is pretty much what Reggie Bush did, right? I mean, he took a lot of money, but it's pretty much what he did. But he was worth a lot of money because Reggie Bush was really damn good, right? So do you feel – so with that question, with that point comes a question, where would the money come from?
Whew. That's a good question. That's one I don't know if I'm at the seat to answer right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's something that's got to be had. But that's for people that make way more money than me to figure out. But I have no idea where the money would come from.
Because I know that one thing that fans will say when they're looking at college sports, they're looking at Alabama football and these big programs, or Duke basketball, and where coaches' salaries are public and how much money they're making, and they got a private jet and all these things. And they're like, all right, well, you could just take a little bit of that coach salary and you can split it amongst the whole team and everybody's eating. But not every college program is like that. I would estimate that the majority of them are not like that, where they're just printing money.
Right.
So if all the players are getting paid, that doesn't cover every program. So that's just something that I think a lot of people don't really understand. All that said, now let's move on to talking about just coaching this generation of players outside of the stuff we have already talked about. Not even 20 years after we played in college, we got a whole new generation of players out there, and there's a whole different world that they grew up in. How do you have to deal with today's player as a coach differently than the way your coaches dealt with you or us as players a couple generations ago?
Yeah, it's certainly different. We are a relationship-based program, and a lot of it, I hate to keep bagging on the guy, but I take a lot of things that I didn't get in my college experience, and I put them into our program. Like, we didn't have great relationships with our coach. And it just wasn't Auburn Gilliam. This is my first coach, too. It was like those dudes would show up from 3 to 5, and I think it's not just Penn State. I think this is a lot of coaches when you're talking about 20 years ago. They would show up from 3 to 5, 2 to 4, whatever you practice, tell you exactly how they felt about you with no regard. Like, if it hurt your feelings, if you went back to cry, it didn't matter. They would tell you exactly how they feel. After that, they're not calling you. They're not texting you. They're not checking up on you. It was none of that. So with me, I try to be intentional with the relationships, make sure my staff is intentional with the relationships with our guys, making sure that we're tapping in with them on a daily basis. One of the rules that we have in our program is I want every student athlete to check into the offices by 1 o'clock. Come by, say what's up. It can be a quick, hey, what's good with you? How was your day? What you got going on? But before 1 o'clock, you got to check in with me or one of my assistant coaches and just say what's up.
That's every day?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day.
Interesting.
Because you just want to build those relationships up with your student athletes. And I feel like once you do that, if I got y'all guys checking in on a daily basis, if there is something wrong or something that needs to be addressed, it can come out in a more organic flow if we talk on a daily basis. And now if you need to lay something on me that's heavy, you could close the door and be like, yo, coach, like, I'm struggling over here. But you feel more comfortable like that. And that's kind of how we do it. Because we hold our guys accountable. When you're trying to win a championship, you got to hold people accountable. But they know the accountability that comes from me comes with love, because I check on them. Before we got on this, I had text messages all the way last night. I was texting with every guy on our team last night about the playoffs being on. So I think that's where the kind of like the difference in the generations lie. We didn't have no relationship with Coach. I didn't know what Coach's favorite food was. I didn't know if he had a wife or girlfriend. I didn't know if he had any kids. I didn't know where he lived. Did you know where he lived?
You're referring to our college coach.
Yeah.
From Altoona. I didn't know anything about him.
Nothing. We didn't know anything. So
right.
Only time you heard from the dude is when you did something wrong. And a lot of times at practice, you were doing something wrong. I played 13 years in the NBA.
That's the one thing that I knew about. I almost said that.
That's ingrained into my mind because I was the point guard. So, like, if we had something that, and now I'm on a tangent, if we had something, because I try to have a relationship with our point guard, like, I want them to be, as the head coach, I want us to be like a snake. We're thinking together. I was the point guard, and I couldn't ask dude a question because without him thinking I was questioning him and saying he played 13 years in the league. I'm like, dude, I get that. I'm trying to understand why we're running the play on this side if I like driving left versus driving right. He ain't had no answers for that. You know what I'm saying? So, like, we try to do our program. Like, I could have so many stories, but, like, that's where there was a disconnect there, and I try not to have it as a disconnect now that I'm a head coach. Like, I want my guys to ask questions. I call them the why generation because they need to know why they're doing everything. So if we're playing a ball screen this way, I want to tell my guys a clear, concise why that we're doing that. Back then, you didn't need a why. And if you did ask why, it's because I played 13 years in the NBA, man. That's why. That's why we're doing that.
Yeah, so what Wes is referring to is our coach at Penn State, Altoona, Armin Gilliam. He had played in the NBA. For those of you old enough to remember, he got drafted in the late 80s, so some of you weren't even alive then. But whenever we would be in practice, and if anyone questioned something that he said or he was criticizing the player and you bristled at the criticism, his retort was, hey, I played 13 years in the NBA, basically letting you know my achievements on the court are greater than yours, so you don't have any standing to question anything that I say. And the challenge, well, Wes, you tell us, what was the challenge with a coach taking that stand? Even though technically he was correct. His basketball career superseded everyone that played at Penn State Altoona. He was right, but how did that affect his relationship with the players and the performance of the team?
Well, I think for the most part, we had great guys that just wanted, like, to know why we did stuff. Like, they just wanted, like, general answers. You wanted to feel like, and this isn't any organization, you want to feel like your opinion matters. You want to have, and I think that's how you can give people ownership in a company, in a program, is making sure that their input is valued. We had no input in our program from the plays that we ran to anything. And if you ask Coach, he wouldn't tell you anything. So it soured the overall experience to the point where you just, like, I'll say it like this. Somebody who's doing a job just to do a job, you're going to get the bare minimum out of those people, the bare minimum. They're never going to stretch past, if it's 8 to 5, at 5:01, they're out the door. They're not going to show up ever at 7 and start early. That's all you're going to get. And it goes the same way from playing. We give Coach, in my opinion, Coach got the bare minimum out of all the talent that we had on our campus because of kind of like his leadership ways. I guess you could call that leadership.
All right, and
not to bag on the guy, but I am bagging on the guy.
I mean, well, we're telling what happened, and people who listen to this show know I've mentioned many times many of the things that you're saying here, and I know you said you got plenty of stories, but we want to hear those stories. So anyone that comes to mind, go ahead and share it. But as far as one thing I must say also about Penn State Altoona, coach before Armin Gilliam, Kenny Macklin, he actually was doing the things that you're mentioning. You didn't get to play for Macklin, but he was doing those things. He would explain, all right, this is what we're doing, and then he would say, well, here's why we're doing it. And if he changed something, he would explain why it was, and he would talk to us, and he would call us and reach out to us. He was doing those things that Coach Armin Gilliam was not doing for whatever reason. So shout out to Kenny Macklin as well. He's the one who recruited me to Altoona. But one of the things that you said, Wes, you talked about that daily check-in. And it's interesting that you said this because my business coach, guy by the name of Alex Sharfin, he talks about having a daily huddle, even running a business as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, that every day you want everyone who's on your team, whether that's the lowest person on the totem pole, your leaders, your managers, whoever, everybody to at least see each other, even if you do it on Zoom. See each other in person, talk about what happened yesterday, go over what the agenda is for today, even if it only takes 15 minutes for everyone to just see each other. So where did you get that? So that's something that applies in the business world for those listening. So where did you get that idea of having your players do that with your program?
I got that idea from Penny Collins. Penny Collins is the head coach at Tennessee State.
Okay.
And somebody that I can't even really call Penny a friend. Penny's somebody that I reached out to just because I liked his style and swag, and I kind of liked some of the stuff that he had done on YouTube. It was a cold call. I got somebody's number from Penny, texted him, set up a call, and that was one of the things that he told me. And so I stole it from him. But once again, there goes the cold call helping our program. But now our guys love it. And even if a guy can't check in through that, I would have them FaceTime me just so I can say what's up to him. And I love the idea of a daily huddle. I meet with my staff every day. And it doesn't got to be, I forget, you said Alex Sharpton?
Sharfen, Charfen.
Sharpton.
Yeah, Sharfen.
I love the idea. I never thought of it from that standpoint, but I like it from the standpoint of it just, I call it, my staff probably gets tired. I was like, yo, let's get organized. That could take 5 minutes or that could take 15 minutes, but every day, like, let's get organized. Let's get organized for practice, what we got to do for the day, recruiting calls that I need to make when I'm gone. Because after that, I let those guys go work. Like, you got to go get a haircut. You got to go do something with your family, go. But, like, let's get organized. So I love that idea. I like the idea of a daily huddle. I'm going to use that now, huddle, but I like that.
Great. So talking about going back to where within our generation and the coaches that you have referenced playing for in college and some of the coaches that I played for, whether back in the neighborhood, youth, college, high school, that coaches they didn't feel like they needed to explain things to the players back then. And even, I don't know about your parents, but even my parents, our parents were like that. It's kind of the way that was what the generation was. These people who were coaching us, these people were born in the 50s and the 60s. And they were raised that way, and they raised their kids that way, people who are in our age group now. So let's say from the 30s to let's say between age 30 and 50. I think a lot of us were raised that way, and a lot of the adults who were our mentors, they raised us that way. Like, you don't question me. I'm going to tell you what it is. You do it. And if you don't like it, you leave. Or you get your ass kicked, depending on who it was. So do you believe, Wes, now as an adult and being in charge of youth, do you believe that toughened you up in some ways that actually was positive, that still are beneficial to you, walking around these days as an adult?
Yep, I do think it. I do think it toughened me up from a standpoint of you learn kind of how to deal with adverse situations a little bit different. Because like you said, your parents, black parents especially, they just told you what it was.
Right.
Yo, can I spend the night at Dre house? No. You better not even ask why.
No,
you ask why, you might get slapped.
No, you don't ask.
And then a typical parental response would be, yo, then, because I told you so. Because I told you to.
Right.
But I do think it toughened me up, to be honest. I do think it toughened me up in a lot of ways that now I feel like I'm not as, like, immune to hearing no because of the way I was raised, to be honest. So I do think it toughened me up. But another thing that it did was, as I started to get more information when after college, as I started to read more leadership books and everything else like that, now I have two different ways that I can address an issue. Like, there's sometimes as a leader that I'm going to tell you to do something and you just got to do it. And then there's other times where it's open for discussion. But now, as I read more leadership books, I knew that there was another way that it could be done. But I also came up in a household where if I need to put my foot down and say this is what it is, then this is what it is. So it did toughen me up. Being on both sides of it helped my leadership because now I know in what matter I need to address some stuff, if that makes sense. But
Absolutely. So nowadays, I mean, you're a head coach, so you're going to have to criticize a player every now and then because players mess up. Basketball is an imperfect game, and you're dealing with kids between the ages of, 17 to 25. So they're going to make mistakes. So when you do need to criticize a player, how do you do it compared to how it was done to you?
number one, I think they know that I'm giving it to them to help them be better because of our relationship off the court. I think that's the first thing. We got a baseline relationship, so they know anything that I'm trying to tell them is going to be for their betterment and the team's betterment. When you take it to our student athlete experience, I don't know if coach ever cared about us. So anything that he's telling me, I'm immediately going to put my guard up too, just because we don't got no relationship. So if coach is telling me, hey, get your ass there faster, like I'm immediately going to bristle up and be like, wow. Or you know what I'm saying? Because we ain't got no relationship. And I think that's with anything that you do. So my first thing is I try to come at these guys with knowing the relationship. Number two, I try to meet guys on their level. And where I say meet them on their level, that goes back to like, I got to coach every guy on my roster different. There's some guys that I can yell at in a public setting. I can yell at them from down on the baseline, and they're cool. There's some guys that if I yell at them, they would shut down, and we don't get anything from them for the next week. There's other guys that when I'm coaching in practice, if they mess up, they might be a guy that I need to sub somebody into their spot, pull them over to the side, tell them something in their ear, smack them on the butt, and be like, I believe in you. And that's part of knowing yourself. That's part of knowing your staff. That's part of knowing your players and your team when you're a leader. Like, not everybody don't respond to the same stuff. But as the leader and the information gatherer, you got to know your team inside and out, knowing how can I get the best out of this person, in what ways can bring the best out of them. And that's how I act as a leader because it didn't happen to me. You know, we bagging on coach, but I mean, that's what it was. We didn't have no relationship. So, like, if coach told you something, you're like, yo, where's this coming from? Like, if he's getting on you in film, you never know that coach cares about you. He never took us out to no lunch, no dinner. He never said, meet us at Port Scott. He never knew what my girlfriend's name was. I know that about all my guys. So then, if I'm saying, get your ass to that spot over there, they know that it's coming from a place where me getting to that spot is the best thing for me, for this team, and everybody. Because coach is telling me to do it, but it starts with a relationship.
It sounds like you're referring to, you're touching on empathy is what you're talking about here. And my girlfriend, Anna, she's actually a business coach. And one of the things that I've heard her talk about many times is what you just talked about, which is knowing each person individually. You can't talk to everybody the same way. I remember sometimes I was trying to help Anna with her workouts, her fitness, and I was trying to tell her my way, and it wasn't working. She was explaining to me, hey, you can't talk to me that way because I'm not you. And it was something that I'm still a work in progress when it comes to that, but it sounds like you have a really solid understanding of that. So my question to you is, you said you had to talk to people on their level. How do you even know what your players' levels are? You walk in the gym, there's 15 players in there who you never met before. How do you learn what each guy's level is and how you can talk to each one?
You know, it's no perfect science. I think it's trial and error, and Dre, that's a big part of why we do the daily check-in, because that gives me an automatic barometer on their day. And then now the first interaction that they're having with me, it's not basketball related. So the first time that I'm talking to them on the floor, if I got to get on their ass, now if I haven't talked to them the whole day and the first interaction they're having with coach today is him yelling at me, that's not good in that kid's mind. So that's a reason for the daily check-in. Number one, like that's where we start. And then number two, for me, it's trial and error. Like when I'm coming into a team, a lot of the time is when we're having the meetings with our guys, I'm like, yo, how do you want me to coach you? Number one, I take some trickery out of it. Number one, I'm like, what's your goals? I get everybody's goals. What's your goals? What do you want to do this year? What's your goals? How do you want me to help you reach your goals? How do you want me to hold you accountable to those goals? How do you want me to coach you? And then from there, you start to get a baseline on it. Like, Coach, I just want you to be. There's guys that like I got to be on their ass from the second that I walk in the gym, and there's other guys that if I look at them, they will straighten up. So it's all different, and I think it's trial and error. So if I start off, if I got a freshman and he's like, "Hey, coach, I want you to be on my ass," and he's the point guard, and I jump down his throat, and he has a trash rest of the day of practice. In our next check-in that day, I'm be like, you go back to empty. I'm be like, yo, like, what was up with you yesterday? And if we got a relationship, he's gonna say like, coach, like, yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was right that you yelled at me in front of everybody. That tells me right there I can't approach him and coach him like that if I'm going to get the best out of him. And then it just goes back to how you coach your guys in the game, because you coach them in practice and in the game the same way. So not everybody is the same, but I think it's like a scientific experiment. You got to figure out what works for you, that guy, and you got to figure out what works for your team. Like this year, we had a lot of success. There wasn't a halftime or post game that I yelled at my team. Like I yelled at them one time. I would say we had like a preseason scrimmage at halftime, and they came out and they were terrible. They were flat. I had a team that really I had to talk to them more like this. Talk to them about like, yo, what's going on? We're not living up to our potential. We're not reaching our goals like this. I had to talk to them more. Now next year's team could be completely different. I might have to go in there and kick down 55 chairs, even though if I don't want to get them going. But you learn about people, and I think it's an ongoing process.
So one of the things I heard you say there is that if you talk to a player one-on-one after they shut down and they say something like, hey, I just didn't think it was right for you to have done what you did, you're intimating that you're okay with a player at least sometimes letting you know that they disagree with your approach? You're all right with that?
Absolutely.
You're open to that?
Absolutely. That's a huge part. That's a huge part in my leadership model. From my assistants to my players, I want everybody to have input in what we do. I want everybody to be able to voice their opinion in what we do. Now, with that being said, I'm the guy at the top. I got the Bobby Bowden. Like, all y'all got one vote. I got 10 votes. I'm going to do what I want to do at the end of the day. But I get input from everybody in our program because I think that's how you can get buy-in. Like at Penn State Altoona, we keep referencing because we're talking about two programs. There was no buy-in from us because we didn't feel like our voice mattered. So for me, I try to give all of our players a voice so they know that I'm at least listening. My assistants, the same way. I'm at least listening. I might not always agree with you, and that's cool. But if we got a relationship, we can get past a disagreement. But I'm always going to care about how you feel. And like all my guys know that. I might not agree with you. And there'll be sometimes that my assistants or my players will say something, I'll be like, that shit is great. Like, yeah, let's do that. And there's other times I'll be like, nah, we never, ever, ever do that. But they know that I'm open to that. And they also know since we got a baseline relationship that I am going to listen to them.
That's huge. Now, like you just said, you're willing to hear input from everyone within the program. Now, what about people who may be on the outside of the program, indirectly involved? For example, you're dealing with young players. And I know that when you have players at that age group, sometimes the parents are still involved. Some players, you never hear about their parents. And some players, the parents are always there. They at every game. How do you deal with parents who insist on meddling in either team affairs, or you can tell that parent is a little bit too much in one of your players' ears and things like that? Let's say they think their player should be starting, but they're the eighth guy. How do you deal with that?
So it starts with a baseline relationship with the parents as well. And I'm different. I give my parents an ear. So like, I'll listen to their opinion. I'll listen to them if they think Lil Johnny, if Lil Johnny is the eighth man and he thinks he should be starting, I'll listen to that. And then I'll tell them exactly where we are. Because at the end of the day, people respect truth. And I also ask those people to respect the fact that they're not on the daily workings in our program. And I ask all our guys to share honest opinions with their parents and stuff like that. If you're practicing like trash, tell your parents I'm not practicing well. That's why I'm the eighth man. Like, we try to deal in truths as much as we can. Like, so like, I'll give parents an ear so they can at least feel like they've got it off their chest. And I'm also going to tell them the honest assessment from our side. And I think at the end of the day, people value honesty. I wouldn't even call them flare-ups. You know, I'm open to our parents calling me, and I let them talk. And after that, I tell them exactly what I say and how I feel and what it's going to be. But I don't shut them out. I don't make them feel like they don't have a chance to at least call Coach Wes and kind of see that from that angle. But I do be honest with them. And then one of the questions that I like to ask parents, I just want to make sure that our message to little Johnny is the same, is one of the things I always say. Like, I just want to make sure our message is the same to him, that we have his same goals in mind when we're talking about it.
So as an assistant coach, associate head coach, when you were at Northern Arizona, one thing you mentioned is that you got like 100 emails a day from players trying to get recruited, walk on scholarships to play ball. What's it like now?
It's a little bit less as a head coach. I probably get about 50. A lot of the times it goes to my assistants. A lot of the times now versus coming to me. But I do get a lot of correspondence. You get, in my role now, I get a lot more coaches reaching out to me directly, whether it be high school coaches, high school assistants, AAU coaches, club coaches, athletic directors reaching out and basically sending me a letter of recommendation for a player is the thing that I get now more that being an assistant or associate I used to get, films, the review eval. Now I get more higher people vouching for guys' character and things of that nature.
Okay, so that's another layer of the game that I wasn't even aware of now. So when you were an assistant coach, you would hear from the players who were just trying to sell themselves directly. But now as a head coach, you're hearing from their coaches, the players' coaches, who are trying to put in a good word for their player, still trying to achieve the same outcome, but it's just a different person reaching out to you now.
Yep. So I get a lot more emails from people that are trying to help people and like, hey, this is Johnny's highlight tape, and they would send me they introduce themselves and they send me a little bit of background on them and then their highlight link or something else like that. But I get them from high school coaches, all those people, director of athletics at high schools who reach out to me now to vouch for people's character and do stuff like that now.
That's interesting. I never even thought about that. So is it any different? Is it more effective to hear from them than it is to hear from players back when you were at NAU?
Not really. Not just because since I still used to read those ones back in the day, I would read those too. It's just coming from a different person. So for me, the response would just vary. So if AD took time to reach out on behalf of a player, I would at least let them know, even if they're not what we were looking for. I appreciate them taking the time to send me a correspondence and like that. I just think some levels of titles, you got to respond to some people, high school coaches too, because I think that if a high school head coach reached out to write me, that player might not be for my program, but they might have one in 4 years that is for our program that they might remember that, this dude didn't just erase my email. He at least got back to me. So the next time they hear Wes Pifer, whether I be at Western Oregon or Duke, they're like, oh, okay, this dude reached out and he had a response even when he didn't have to have a response. Once again, how you treat people means stuff.
All right. So being that Western Oregon is a Division II university, right?
Right.
Being that you're in D2, that's kind of like the way that I see it, and this is as an outsider looking in who played basketball, but I don't know the college basketball landscape. D2 is kind of it's definitely right in the middle, right? So you have D1. Every high school basketball player wants to go D1 if everything goes perfect, right? And then you had the players who are kind of like how I was coming out of high school, who had no resume, nothing going for them, and they're happy to just get on to D3 so they can get on the team and do something. And D2 is kind of like the stepsister in the middle of it, right? So it's like,
right.
And D2 offers scholarships, right? You can't get a scholarship when you play D2. There's no scholarships at D3. Everybody wants to go D1 just to say they went D1. So as a D2 head coach, what is your strategy for actually recruiting players? Because I'm sure every player you recruit is like, all right, I didn't get the D1, or they might even still be trying to get a D1. How do you get a player to even say, all right, I'm going to go D2 and actually be happy about it and proud of myself?
No, man, that's a great question. I think we're still trying to figure that model out. It's completely right. Everybody's got a Division One or bust mentality. To me, Division Two is the hardest level to recruit to because all the players want to go Division One. All the coaches want their guys to go Division One because that's what looks the best. All the junior college guys, all the prep school guys, they want to say how many guys they sent to Division One. Uh, in Division Two, you're right. It's like steps. I think you got to find number one. We got to find guys with Division One level talent, but also you got to find guys with the right mentality and mindset. For me, I try to find guys that are like myself. I felt like I was a little bit under the radar, so it put a chip on my shoulder. So I look for guys like that. I look for guys that have Division One talent. They got a chip on their shoulder that want to come into play at a high level D2 to compete, to maybe show those people at Division One that they are on their level and they can compete with those guys. And I think it's like a niche that you got to find in guys. And you also got to find guys that are comfortable being at Western Oregon. Like, I want guys that want to be here. Like, not a guy that wants to be here for a year and try to go Division One. I want a guy really comfortable with me as the head coach, and I want a guy that's comfortable in their own skin and like, hey, I want to go to Western Oregon and leave a legacy. You know, I think this is a place, like, the thing that we sell a lot of the times when we're recruiting against a Division One who might not want them as much as we want them bad. It's like, well, do you want to go to Division One to say you went there, or do you want to have a championship level experience and be able to compete for a championship? I can sell my professional experience. For instance, we had Dalvin Boucher, who I mentioned earlier. Dalvin is for sure a Division One guard that we got to come here. And now, since he had a championship level experience and played to his potential, he's going to start his career in the first division as Holland, which is very hard to do. He went to just an okay Division One. I don't know if he would have had that same opportunity. So we try to find that niche market of guys who have that chip on their shoulder and want to come here and prove to people. No different from Dre when we came up playing Division III. We chopped our bit to play in the summer league in Mansion Park, in the summer leagues at KNY, against guys that were higher than us, D2 guys, D1 guys. So I like to find guys that have that kind of like chip on their shoulder, that they know they can compete at that level, but they feel comfortable enough to come here and prove themselves.
So those leagues that Wes just mentioned, Mansion Park, KNY, those are leagues that at least they did exist when we were coming up out in Altoona, PA, where we went to school. I don't know if they still exist now, but shout out to Altoona, PA, and all the ball players we played against out there. So being that we had come from a D3, we talked about this a little bit the second time you were on in episode 883 when we were talking about competitiveness. Being that we played at a D3, it wasn't a high level of competition on our campus, so we would, me, you, and our guy B Battles, we would travel around and play at whatever leagues or whatever pickup games or whatever. I mean, we went to D1 campuses, D3 campuses, D2 campuses, and we were playing in the town against players who were from wherever, and people came to know the three of us because they're like, oh, these guys play at Altoona, D3 school, but we were showing up and playing everywhere just to prove ourselves and to get better at the same time, right? Right. So you mentioned that one of your players, Dalvin Brazier, he signed in Howland, you said? First league in Howland to play overseas. So that was my next question. Can a player who plays D2 go overseas? Because a lot of players, I think, well, you can answer this. What amount of players who are looking for a scholarship level amateurs who are going to college, D1, D2, what percentage of those players want to now, after that, they want to go play pro? So let's say they're in 12th grade. They're about to get a scholarship, D1 or D2. How many of them think they're going to go pro? And when a player does go D2, let's say they quote-unquote settle for D2, they want to go D1, can you still go pro from that level?
Well, I mean, I think the answer to the first question, I'll probably say 95%.
95% of players who get a scholarship want to play pro basketball after?
Yes.
Okay.
If they get a scholarship. So take this one right here. This is the one that I would use. So say if you go to, so we're saying scholarship. So if you go to a Division II locker room in that first meeting, you'd be like, hey, we come out, we win a national championship this year. Like, who wants to go pro? If you go in there, I would say if it's 15 guys, I'm going to say 14 are going to raise their hand that they want to play professional basketball. I would say that. I really believe that. You would have even guys that are walking on, they said they would want to do it.
Right.
But the reality of it is it ain't happening. Even if you go to the Division I mid-major level, like if you look at the all-league teams, like might be the best 10, 15 players in that league, like there might be one guy that might have a chance to even get a sniff at the NBA. And when I say sniff, like workout-wise. And then a couple of those guys, if you take that same 15, there might be 3, 4 guys that might have a chance to play professionally. So it's slim pickings, man. And we try to tell guys, like, that goes back to the honesty part of guys. And I've been there, so I know what a pro looks like, and I know the different levels of being at a pro. I've had guys, Stanton Kidd, who's in the NBA with the Jazz, and I've had guys like Dalvin. Another senior, we have Jalen Richardson, who's going to get an entry-level job this year playing professionally. So I've seen it at all levels, so I think I have a good gauge on where a guy could be at. So I try to be honest. You know, when I was at NAU as an associate, if a guy came and sat down in my office like, hey, I want to play professional, like, hey, bro, you need to get a job. Like, you need to go back home and be a teacher. Like, it ain't for everybody. Those are tough conversations now. Because people have been working a long time for you to try to say stuff like that. But I try to keep it real with guys that come talk to me about that, because I know what it looks like. I've been there. I know what it looks like. I know what they're looking for. We could talk a ton about professional basketball, but one of the things is when we talk about recruiting stuff like Division II, my level, that I would use for guys, number one, I got the connections that I can help, that I remain live to, like the connections that I have. And then playing professional basketball, when you're coming from if you're thinking about D1 versus D2, the first thing that they're going to look for on your resume is winning. Like, a lot of people don't know that. Like, when you're talking about playing professional basketball, they're going to look to see if you won where you're at. So if you went to a D1 and you averaged 8 a game, and your team was kind of dicey versus somebody like Dow, who went to 2 NCAA tournaments and averaged 19 a game and was an all-league guy and won, his resume is going to trump some of those other guys' resumes. They're going to look for guys who have won, because the harsh reality is, and what people don't talk about, if you go over there and you don't win, your ass is coming home. And it's only a matter of time. You go over there as a rookie, go lose your first 2-3 games. Man, you coming home. People won't tell you the real stuff that happens over there, but like, go lose your first 2 or 3 games. You'll be down there warming up and practicing. If you're a point guard, another point guard gonna come in that door, and then y'all practice the next day, and then you be gone.
So when a player does take that D2 route, since 95% of players' ultimate goal is to go pro, every player wants to play in the NBA, and then there are players who will say, all right, I'll go overseas if I can't go to the NBA. D2 is a route that can take you to the pros. It really just depends on, you need to be part of a winning program in college, and you need to have performed. Is there anything else you would add to that?
I would leave with those things. Have good statistics, be at a winning program. So this year in the GNAC, so Dow signed first division in Holland with Rotterdam. We got another kid, Trevor Zinski, who played at Western Washington, 6'7" guard, who's going to go play in the Netherlands. And then we got a kid, Alberto Diaz, that played at Northwest Nazarene, who's going to go back to the first league in Mexico. And if you talk about those 3 programs, those are the top 4 programs in our league. So us, Seattle Pacific, Western Washington, Northwest Nazarene, top 4 programs. So all those guys won and put up numbers. And I think you can start to see. And the second piece of that is, with basketball being like it is, like, you got to perform where you're at, because they find you anywhere. Like, people get found anywhere, because now it's just a thing. Like, they're searching for guys overseas. You know, they got the Greek freak, you know, who thought he would be where he is. Now they're searching overseas. Then you see guys like Dame Lillard come out of places like Weber State, and C.J. McCollum come out of Lehigh. And you're seeing guys come out of Division II. So they're going to find people. They're just trying to find the best people they can. So wherever you at, perform.
Being that you played overseas, you mentioned this, you touched on this earlier. Is there a benefit when you're recruiting players who and like you said, damn near every player wants to play professional after college. Is there a benefit to a player right now who's thinking about your school versus another school with a coach who didn't play? Do you offer any benefits being that you did play?
Yeah, I mean, in recruiting, you're obviously selling your strengths. So, like, that's one of my strengths. I've
Yeah.
maintained healthy relationships from every connection that I had in my time overseas. And that's just not the team that I played with. That was anybody I came in contact with, I stayed in contact with. So I think I can give you a different perspective and a different level of connection than someone else. Like, for instance, I spoke about Jalen. I put Jalen in contact with my old team. They know exactly. I know the inner workings of what that day looks like, and they are asking me, is he prepared for this? Is he prepared for that? I'm like, well, he played for me. I know the city. I know the landscape. So they have direct knowledge that I know exactly what's going on. And because of it, right now they're still in the freeze, but it's down to him and one other guy for that position. So I think that's something that I can sell in recruiting. But I've been there, and also, when people reach out to me, whether it be NBA scouts or overseas scouts, I can reference my professional playing career as something that gives them a leg up on other programs, because I've been there and done it. Until you don't know until you know. And then once you know, I think it's only right that you kind of use your talents and your expertise as best you can.
Now, this is something that we did talk about in previous conversations, but I want to touch on it again. When you as a coach, as a head coach, when your seniors are graduating and they're looking to go pro, so let's say there's an agent or an NBA scout or an overseas team who is looking at that player, I would assume they're going to reach out to you to find out the scoop on that player. What kind of questions do they ask, and what do you tell them?
You would be surprised. The first thing coming from my chair is I'm going to tell the absolute truth, because if I don't tell the truth about that guy, they will never respect my word for the guys coming behind them. They ask all kinds of questions. Is he a good teammate? Does he smoke? Does he drink? How does he respond to coaching? How fast does he pick up plays? And when you talk about being a good teammate, is he a good screener? You would never think that. They ask, is he a good screener? Because that's part of being a good teammate. You know what I'm saying? They ask stuff like that. How is he in meetings? How does he respond to coaching? How will he respond? How will he respond to a loss? So there's a bevy of questions, and I'll tell you another level of it. They just don't call me. Like, if they call, like, just say for Dalvin, they will call other head coaches in this league. So those head coaches I met, Western Washington, Seattle Pacific, they're going to call them. Hey, what did you think about Dalvin? And they're going to tell, everybody's going to know what kind of player he is. What did you think of him off the floor? How did he act? I see you guys beat them in overtime. How did he act after that loss? Those are questions that get asked. And they're asking all those people. They're going to ask people in the athletic training room about you. They're going to ask people that you would never thought, compliance people. We had one of my good friends, and this is information that's coming straight from the NBA scout. One of my good friends, Mike Lee. Mike played at Kansas for Roy Williams and Bill Self. Went to 3 Final Fours. He's now an assistant with the Golden State G League team, the Santa Cruz Warriors. And he's a scout for them. So he came on Zoom 2 weeks ago and talked to our team and gave them this same information, like the real, like what they're really going to ask and stuff like that. He said they were going back looking at high school guidance counselors. Like, if they're talking about they want to sign you to the team and everything else like that. He was talking about, he gave us a ton of gems, this stuff that I think opened our guys up. Some of the questions I'm just asking, that I just mentioned right there.
That's big. So let's pivot and talk about recently, over these last 6 months, what's been your experience with COVID-19? How's your life changed?
Man. I think it spun everybody upside down. The biggest thing that COVID has done for me is it's even focused me even more. And I know that might be a weird answer, but the thing that I'm personally taking and the thing that I took to my team is, from this experience, you're either going to be better or you're going to be worse. You're going to come out of COVID-19, whenever it is, you're going to come out better or you're going to come out worse. You pick it. And the thing that we talk about, and it's on my Twitter background, is win the wait. So we don't know how long this wait is going to be. Right now it's at 6 months? We don't know how long it's going to be till it becomes a new normal. But after this, there's going to be a clear level of separation, in my opinion, from the people who've been working. This is basketball players, basketball coaches. This is computer script writers. This is whatever industry you're in. There was an opportunity right now that you could be really, really lax. You could work from home. You could be undisciplined. Like, there are a number of things that we talked about in the highlights. So I think for COVID, it heightened me. And I made sure that it heightened our roster, too, that you're coming out of this better or you're coming out of it worse. So I've been trying to undertake stuff on at least 2-3 things every day to help me get better as a coach, whether that be film, conversations I'm having, whether that be conversations with people like Dre, cold calling people, all kinds of stuff to make sure that I'm winning my weight in my position. And I think that is the biggest thing that COVID has done for me. Crisis speeds things up. So if you were good before this, when you come out of this, if you got another layer to yourself, you're going to separate yourself from some. And listen, I didn't want to go into that much about that, Drake, because I wanted to keep that for myself, because I feel like there's a lot of people in a lot of professions that are going to take this and basically be lazy. Use this as an opportunity, like, yeah, I'm going to work from home. Yeah, I'm going to wake up at 9 or 10 o'clock today. Yeah, I'm going to just do the bare minimum. I feel like a lot of people are going to do that for 6-7 months. And I feel like that I am, and my team is hopefully doing the same thing, that this 7 months is, we looking at that shit as like go time. So by the time that this thing pops back and we get to something normal, you're going to see some level of separation. That's a long answer. It's kind of a weird answer, but like that's kind of been my whole driving force behind COVID.
How do you recruit with COVID? Is it the same as before, or are you doing something different?
It's a little bit different. I'm watching a ton more film, like on my MacBook. I'm watching a ton more film. I'm watching these tournaments that are being live streamed. I'm going back from junior college guys I'm recruiting, watching high school film, high school kids seeing. I'm watching their junior film. I'm talking to a lot more people than I would do compiling information about character and about their abilities than I usually would, because I'm a person, I like to see people face to face. I like to look people in their eye. You can't do that. So the next best thing for me is to gather as much information that I can. So now I'm probably calling more people, looking at more film than I probably have in the previous 15 years.
How do you actually recruit a player? Like, if you decide you're trying to get this player or that player, I'm assuming your college campus has been kind of shut down. How do you show them the campus? How do you offer them? How do you get them to commit to you? How can you do that when it's not as high touch as it used to be?
Yeah, I think you got to be creative. My assistant, Brian Fisher, he's big time. He put together basically a virtual tour of our campus, our locker room, and coupled it with a style of play video that's about 4 minutes long that we can send to anybody's phone or through email. And it's big time. You get a chance to see all the highlights of our campus, our locker room, the trophies that we've won. You get a chance to see all that with a style of play. He can send that along, and it can give you a snapshot of our campus, even though you can't view it. And then we're just being creative, just like this. Like, if we have somebody we want, we try to get on Zoom with them, see them face to face like that. We've done a number of these with the 2021 class, just getting in front of them virtually, meeting them virtually, and having these calls. I'm more of a face-to-face communicator. I FaceTime people, especially I FaceTime people I know all the time. I FaceTime Dre. Like, if I call Dre now, I just FaceTime him. I FaceTime my players. I FaceTime my staff. So now, with recruiting-wise, trying to think outside the box, I FaceTime my recruits. Like, they'll randomly see, like, Wes Pifer, FaceTime. Like, what? This dude is FaceTiming me? And I'll be on, like, what's up, man? What's going on? Just checking in with you. But you're just trying to be unique. You're trying to separate yourself. And I think that's when it matters, no matter what you do. Being yourself and trying to separate yourself, thinking outside the box is always something that I try. I think Dre's probably one of the best question askers that I've been around. Even with the podcast, Dre asks questions that I'll be like, damn, and just write it down. Like, I never even thought about, like, that was a great question. So I try to ask myself questions like that to try to think outside the box.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I'm a professional brain picker. That's what I do. So that's why these conversations are so long. I just try to learn as much as I can when I know somebody has information I don't have. So has you or anyone you known actually had COVID since it's been around?
Nobody that I know personally.
Okay. So how do you feel about the possibilities for the upcoming basketball season?
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. You got to see how football is going to go, but the TBT bubble, I thought that was very encouraging. I see what we see in the NBA right now. I think that's very encouraging, and I think that as as new discoveries happen. I think 2 weeks ago, they were talking about individual tests would cost about $100, and then the Yale thing came out, and they said they might be able to do it by saliva, which would cost about $10, which would minimize that. So I'm optimistic that if we keep listening to our leadership, doing what they ask us to do, and they have our best interest in mind and heart, that we'll have a season. But I think that we just got to stay on. We just have to stay on the course of being good teammates, doing what is asked of us.
Is Western Oregon going all virtual this upcoming school year, or are they still holding out possibility for bringing people in person?
Yeah, so right now we're going to come back. We're on quarter, so we're a little bit different. We're coming back September, first class day of class, September 26th, and we're about 70-30, so it's about 30% in person, about 70 remote, like hybrid online courses.
Okay. So what if this was happening while we were in college? And let's say right now, I've seen videos. I don't know how active you are on social media, probably not as much as I am, but on social media, I've seen videos from certain schools. I don't even know exactly where they all are, but they're out there, partying and gathering as if nothing happened with nobody with a mask on. And something that I've said this on my story on IG. Listen, if I was in college right now, I'd be right out there with them. I'd be at the parties. I'd be gathering and not socially distancing and talking to the girls and all of that as usual because, listen, I only got these 4 years, so I got to do what I got to do. But what would you be doing, or how do you think things would be if this happened when you were in college? How would you feel about it is a better question.
I just think there's a certain level of ignorance that comes with with us being in college. I'd probably be right there beside you. We'd probably be at the parties together. Just because you don't know. You don't know until you know. I'm going to try to stress to our student athletes how serious this thing is and try to highlight some of the things that happened. And you hope that they make great decisions. But if you're asking, how it would have happened when we was in college, and we're probably out there. There's no question that we're out. Penn State was one of the funnest places I've ever lived. So to ask us to not, be around people and everything else like that, I don't think that was going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on this, but if they had us say virtual classes, I'm good with virtual classes. I'll take my classes on the computer, but let me just be on campus. Let me get my off-campus apartment, and we can still do the party. We could party even more because now we only have to go to the campus. We could just take all our classes on the computer, right? So that's even better. That's perfect. So anyway, let's move on to a different topic. What have been your general thoughts on the protests, the civil unrest that has been happening in America ever since the death of George Floyd? I guess it started there. It didn't begin there, but it flared up at that point.
Yeah, I just think I think so many things are coming. I think so many things are coming to light. Some of the what I would call mistreatments of people who look like me in certain situations by police. That is very, very unsettling to me to see. But it's been happening for quite some time, and it's not something that's new, but it's something that's now been highlighted. I'm thankful that it's been highlighted. I'm different. I'm trying to relay a message to our team about some of the things that happened in my upbringing, with kind of some of the things that they're seeing right now. This is not a thing that just started happening. It's been happening for quite a while. Yeah.
So let's say the basketball season happens, and your players come to you one day at practice and announce that they want to kneel during the national anthem every game. How would you respond to that, and why? And then what would you do? Would you kneel with them? What would your response be?
Oh, that's a great question. the first thing, we have a relationship, so I would want to know from every single guy that planned on doing that. I want to know why. I want to know their why. They'd have to really, really articulate their why that they wanted to do that for me to allow them to do it. Now, if they had something that I was like, okay, well, that makes sense, or they were a victim of something, or something happened that hit close to home, and that's why they want to do it, then I wouldn't be against it. But I would want to know why, because then if something is questioned or somebody asks me why, I can tell that that person has a specific reason why they feel like they feel. I feel like giving my guys a voice. As far as kneeling with them, I don't know. I don't know. I think everybody has a different viewpoint on the kneeling. Like why are you kneeling? What are you kneeling for? It's questions that I think have to be asked and answered. I forgot who it was in the bubble who stood.
Jonathan Isaac.
I know Coach
Orlando
John
Magic.
got it.
Yeah.
And everybody was asking him, why. And actually, hold on. They started taking shots at him before they was asking him why. And I think the next day and the next thing, Coach Pop, he stood and he had a why. And he articulated his why. And after that, people let it go. So my thing would be like, I just want to know the whys. If I'm standing or kneeling, there's gonna be a why. And if my guys are standing and kneeling, there needs to be a why there, and it has to be a strong why, not just because somebody else did it or I saw this NBA player do it. Because reality is like, somebody tweeted this the other day, like celebrities they're not leaders. Like they're celebrities, like they're not leaders as far as like. That might be their thought, but that doesn't mean that has to be your thought because you like the way they play basketball, or you like the way they hit a tennis ball, or you like the way they swim in the pool. That don't mean you gotta agree with some of the stuff they agree. They have a totally different viewpoint and vantage point than you do. So to answer the question, I would want to know whys. There'll have to be a lot of whys answered for me in there, because then I have to go up to my boss and I have to tell her a why.
So I've seen your team, obviously, and you have a racially diverse team. So let's say that does happen, because I think right now, it's a strong possibility that at least some of your players are going to feel that way. And if it happens to be an influential player, they may be able to influence other players. And who knows what's going to happen. Let's say by the time your season starts, the presidential election will have happened already. Maybe something else happens that goes viral in social media. Maybe one of the situations that's already happened doesn't go the way that a certain group of people want it to go. Let's say a cop is found not guilty or something like that, and it flares up all over again. So it's a strong possibility this may occur. So let's just say that you have some players on your team who are very strong, Black Lives Matter supporters, and you have a player who is white who says, you know what, I'm an all lives matter supporter, or they're a supporter of Donald Trump, and they don't want to kneel during the game. And now there may be conflict between your players. How would you handle that? How would you navigate that situation?
I just think that we got to be respectful of everybody's opinion. And I think when you fast forward back to the start of our interview, like I talked about a little bit about, like, I want everybody in our program to have a voice. We communicate more openly than a lot of programs, I would think. So that would be a conversation that we would have, like, within our doors, within our locker room, about, like, why this person feels like they feel. But they're completely entitled to feel that way. And I would not let a person who is on the minority be attacked. And that's on either one of those sides of the spectrum. I would not let that person be attacked by the other group, no matter what that group is. That's just how I feel. And those guys, everybody has different viewpoints and vantage points because how they were raised, how they came up. And a lot of people, if you think about just take us, for instance, Dre, if you talk about our locker room, you split between black and white, you have the political views of your parents. So a lot of people, it just is what it is. African Americans a lot of times are Democrats because your parents were. I couldn't tell you a lot of the stuff when I was their age about politics and why we vote, you know what I'm saying? Like, you couldn't do that. And they might not be able to articulate that too. They might have to get in for their parents. So I think it just starts with a healthy conversation, and then we probably have to take it from there.
All right. Now, Wes, you have kids, you mentioned earlier. And
No.
you're a black man. So what do you tell your kids about police, about race, etc., as they grow older and they start to see more of the world? Eventually, they're going to see the world without you next to them. What do you tell your kids about what's going on right now? Do they know about it? What have you told them?
They just know the bare bones that something happened to a man that shouldn't have happened to him. When we're talking about the George Floyd incident or Ahmaud, they just know that stuff happened to him that shouldn't have happened to him. The baseline that I talk about with my kids is respect. And that's a core value of even my program. Like, I believe in showing people respect, whether it be the CEO of a program or the person mowing the lawn. I think you should show them the same level of respect for any job that they're doing. And the police have a very, very tough, very high stress level job. So the first thing we talk about is respect. Um, if somebody is, above you, I tell my kids every day when they leave out and school is happening to be a great listener. That's showing respect to your teacher. So I start with respect and everything. So that means as they grow older, I'm going to verse them differently